Okay, well, welcome to the weekly Impact Sales Tribe VIP call. Today is going to be a great session. We're going to be talking about one of the things that I think really is important to talk about at the beginning of the year, just like it's important to talk about if you take over something new or start something new. And it's really level setting how you look at things and how you prioritize things. Now, last week, we spent time talking about and reviewing how to, sorry about that, how to kick off the new year. And we talked about 4 critical elements of what you really need to drill down on to kick off the new year in the right way if you really want to get a fast start. Well, today we're going to peel back a layer and focus on a particular topic that really sets the stage for consistency in your business, as well as, you maximizing the potential of what you can generate via your sales. And, the topic that what we're going to talk about is this idea of high value versus low value activities. Now, everybody that is listening to this, whether you're listening to it live or whether you catch the recording of it, has all pretty much heard that sales is a numbers game, right? That you have to generate a certain amount of activity. You have to generate a certain number of calls, contacts, however you're choosing to define it. And that is very, very true. It's driven based upon activity. The problem with activity is you can't just say that it's a numbers game and it's all based upon your activity, because sometimes people get distracted by various types of activity and they convince themselves, and I would kind of dare say almost lie to themselves sometimes, that they have a lot more going on than what they think they have going or actually have going on. And that is based upon understanding the definition of what type of activity they're focusing on. So to coincide with what we talked about during our last VIP, the fast start tips for a quick start to the year, 4 key elements, and I encourage you to go back and listen to that one as well. We're going to talk about high value versus low value activities. Now, I think it's important that we clarify what we mean by these things. I think it's also important that we understand and clearly communicate that what we're referring to is all valuable to your business, but there's a time and a place for everything. And how you choose to prioritize certain activities versus other activities will play a major role in your success. Now, there are a lot of people out there that kind of go off on this frenetic pace of just running at 120 miles an hour and just doing everything as it comes at them. And, they're very, very active. They're very, very busy, and they get a lot done. Nothing wrong with that. But there are times, based upon how things get thrown at us, how challenges, obstacles, rocks in the road get thrown at us, that sometimes we convince ourselves that our activities are getting us where we need to go, when they're really activities that are lower value activities, things that aren't as important, things that shouldn't be prioritized. So today we're going to talk about specifically what the high value activities are. And then we're going to talk about what the low value activities are. And we're going to talk about how you prioritize them. I think this is really, really important. So as you think of high value versus low value activities, let's just start something that I know that everybody's that's been through ISM has heard, but this is very, very true. In my opinion, there really are only 2 specific high value activities. There's only two things that you do that would be considered high value activities as it relates to sales. Certainly as it relates towards you moving to and towards in a rapid pace towards your success in selling. 2 high value activities. Everything else takes a backseat. Everything else is not a high value activity. And these 2 categories of things that we're going to go over should make up what you spend the majority of your time doing. Okay. So I want to make sure we start there. I want to make sure we prioritize, as far as the amount of time we spend on this, the high value activities, and we describe them. So there's really some clarity around that. And then we'll talk about the lower value activities. But it's important that you understand the pecking order of what the 2 high value activities are. And you may have heard this before, but it is very, very true, at least in a selling role, selling environment, or somebody whose particular responsibilities revolve around sales. I'm not in any way saying that other things aren't important. I'm saying that there are two things that should be at the top of the list as high value activities. And those two things are prospecting and selling. Okay. Prospecting and selling. Those are the only two things that fall under the high value activity classification or category. Now, let's break this down a little bit, because I know some people might already be questioning that, or might be wondering, well, there's a lot of other things that I need to do for my business that are important, or for my role that are important. And I'm not saying they aren't important. I'm saying they aren't as high of a priority as prospecting and selling. And I'm going to give you an example. One of the things that many people struggle with when it comes to sales momentum, and I define momentum as consistency, growth, a trend moving upwards with your sales success, your sales results, and the numbers you're generating. One of the things that people struggle with when it comes towards attaining that is this roller coaster effect, this period where numbers seem to be going up and then they go back down, then they go back up again, then they go back down. There's this whole roller coaster effect. And a lot of times it's because they've chosen to not remember what I just said about two high value activities being their priority: prospecting and selling. And here's what happens. People go out there and they prospect and they generate a bunch of suspects that turn into prospects. And those prospects create proposals and quotes and all these other things that we do as it relates to generating business. And then they create and generate follow-up meetings and appointments and all this other activity, right? And then we actually sell and we win that client. That client becomes a client of ours. And now, depending upon what our product offering is, for many people, they now have to kind of flip the hat around, and now they have to be part of implementation. Now, whether they're implementing something themselves, whether they're doing the work themselves, or whether they have somebody else that does the work, or there's another department in the company, there's other people that are responsible, it really doesn't matter. Because what happens is, once somebody is selling consistently, they now have to start focusing some time and attention on facilitation or implementation. They have to deliver. They have to deliver whatever it is that they sold, right? Now, some offerings don't require that much effort in delivery or facilitation, right? Or implementation, but others require a lot. And many times that roller coaster effect that people see as it relates to their sales results is because when they go back and look at their activity, they realize that their activity dropped off, their prospecting efforts dropped off, their sales appointments dropped off, because now they're in operational mode, or they're in the facilitation mode of trying to deliver whatever it is that they sell. And it's not in every case, but it happens in many cases. And then they'll go and deliver that. And then all of a sudden now they realize, well, wow, that now my client's set up and they're running, and I've now delivered this, or I've started that process. Now I can go back to selling. And then they start prospecting again and selling again. And that roller coaster starts going back uphill. The numbers start going up. It looks really, really good, right? Only to have it happen again and again and again. And this is one of the common, blind spots that happens to a lot of people when they're selling, whether they're a coach selling for themselves, or whether they're a consultant or an entrepreneur, where they sell it and then they have to deliver and implement it for people. It can create a lot of challenges. So one of the ways that you close that gap, one of the ways that you level out the roller coaster effect, is to acknowledge that prospecting and selling take the premier spot in your calendar, and they remain as your priorities. They always have to be done. Okay. And prospecting can be defined as anything in regards towards you actively trying to generate more prospects and opportunities for yourself. And selling is when you're interacting directly with those people, trying to convince them to work with you, right? Two very distinctly different things, but the fact is they both have to happen for you to be successful. So how I define these priorities and how I consider them to be high value activities more than anything else, even the deliverables, is because the split second you take your foot off the gas pedal towards prospecting and selling, because you now have to shift focus and do something else, those numbers drop off the map and you lose momentum. You lose that trend of moving in the right direction. And now you're going right back to that cycle that I just talked about. So you need to maintain your prospecting and your selling activity. Now, how you do that is by making sure that you utilize prospecting and selling, and you fill your calendar during the week with high value activities. Now, that does not mean you don't do the other things that you need to do. What it means is the lion's share of your activity remains prospecting and selling. And I'll give you an example. There are a lot of things that people have to do behind the scenes prior to a deal being closed, prior to a deal even being proposed, let alone delivered, right? Sometimes we got to do research. Sometimes we have to build a profile. Sometimes we have to create a proposal. Sometimes we have to create some content or write some content. All of these things have to happen, right? It's all part of the journey, but they shouldn't, under any circumstances, fall into what I call prime time. Now, this is a really important distinction, okay? Prime time, and this is how you should define prime time. Prime time is when both you and your prospects are available, and it creates a higher likelihood for interaction between the two. Perhaps it's the normal business hours. Perhaps it's maybe late morning till early evening, because a lot of your clients are available right after work, depending upon what you sell. But whatever your prime time is, it's defined as the time that both you are available and the time that they are available. Now, that's important to understand, because if you spend a lot of your time and effort trying to do your prospecting and selling outside of prime time, you can imagine what your results look like. They're much, much lower. You're engaging with fewer people. You're having less appointments. You're trying to make things happen, but it's not happening easily because the schedules don't align. And I know this seems like a simple time management thing, but you'd be amazed how many times people get pulled in the wrong direction, and they convince themselves they're like, got to make this proposal perfect. So they dedicate a whole day towards prospecting and building. And then the next day, because of that proposal, they decide that they're going to spend that whole day only focusing on the proposal. Now, I'm not saying you don't do the proposal. I'm saying there's a time and a place, and I would never sacrifice prime time prospecting and selling time to do what really is a lower value activity as far as the priorities go. Now, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be done. I'm not saying that it isn't important to do those things. I'm saying that when you really want to be successful, if you really want to crush your sales numbers, make sure that your prospecting and selling time is protected, it's scheduled, but it's also prime time. It's the time most likely when your prospects are available, most likely when your clients are available, most likely when you can get the most bang for your buck during those hours. If you have a proposal that only requires your time and your energy and your focus, just you, nobody else, you can do it anytime. You can do it anytime. You can do it off hours. You can do it over a weekend. You can do it when you've got some downtime. You can do it over a lunch break, but don't take time away from your prime time prospecting and selling time. It's high value activity. Now, one of the curses of being an entrepreneur or working for yourself, no matter what it is that you do, is you now have the curse of free will. You can make whatever decision you want to how you manage your schedule. And people love it. People love being an entrepreneur or coach or consultant where they can control their own schedule. In theory, that makes sense, but don't let it work against you. Don't let your calendar be filled with things that are lower value activities that aren't prospecting and selling. Because if you do that, you will find that you will fall victim to that roller coaster effect that I just described. And you'll find that your likelihood for success in the efforts you put out during your prospecting and selling are going to be a lot less. It's going to be impacted by that. Now, this is really important for you to understand, because one of the things that helps people get a fast start, one of the things that help people really focus on generating traction quickly, and I've coached thousands of people through this. It's just a reality, is being able to focus, really focus and drill down on doing certain things consistently over and over again. So you get very, very efficient at them. See, if you run from one thing to the next, bouncing back and forth, you don't get into a rhythm. You don't get efficient as quickly as you could because you're bouncing all over the place. You're jumping from one thing to the next. You're not getting any momentum. And in sales, so much comes from that momentum. So much of motivation, excitement, enthusiasm comes from you gaining little traction, seeing little successes, seeing little responses and feedback, and winning business, and all these things work to your advantage. But if you jump around from all over the place and you have your low value activities all in the middle of your day, and you work for 20 minutes on prospecting, and then you shift gears and you jump into working on a proposal, and then you jump into doing some research, and then you're off doing something that is not work related, and you find all of a sudden that you haven't gotten much traction. So I want you to keep in mind that your highest value activities are always prospecting and selling. One of my earliest mentors told me sales is really actually very easy. You know, you make calls, you see people, you solve problems. Pretty straightforward. But if you're making calls when people aren't answering, okay, and you're trying to see people when they're not available, or you're doing other things at that time when you could be in front of somebody, you're going to find that your opportunity to solve problems doesn't happen as quickly as you probably would like. So your highest value activities are always going to be prospecting and selling, and you're going to focus those during your prime time hours, whatever they are for your industry. Because when other people are available and you need other people to be a part of what you're doing as far as your prospecting and selling, that's when you should spend that time. If it's stuff that you could be doing by yourself or off hours, off peak hours, so to speak, then you want to do those things during that time. So what are those things? Let's talk about those for a couple of minutes. I think we spent a lot of time talking about the high value activities. The fact is, everything else is a low value activity. Now, again, I'm not saying there's not value to them. I'm not saying they're not important. I'm not saying you don't need to do them. I'm saying as it relates to priorities, you prioritize prospecting and selling. You don't prioritize working on a proposal. You don't prioritize doing research. You don't prioritize doing manual tasks that aren't related to prospecting and selling. They will not get you where you want to go if you put them in a place of priority. Now, I know that some people may hear that and think, well, they still have to get done. How do I do this? I don't want to be working at midnight. I get it. No, I'm not saying that you should. What I am saying, though, is you need to be very, very protective of your time. And when I look at the people that crush their numbers, the people that just destroy their quotas in front of them and have great momentum with their sales results, they have mastered that equation. They have mastered their prospecting time. They've mastered their selling time. That's done in prime time. It is always the priority. And then later on, when things need to be done, they get them done. Or they get other people to help them get them done. So their time is not spent doing that. And that's another piece of this equation. The question that every entrepreneur has to ask themselves, just like every salesperson has to ask themselves, no matter what it is that you sell, is it better if somebody else does the lower value activity? And the answer is probably is, if it takes you in any way away from prospecting and selling. Does that mean you could offload it to somebody else? Yeah, probably. Might cost you a little bit of money, but I will tell you, take a really close look at what it costs you if you don't. How much time or money are you spending if you're doing low value activities because you know they have to get done, but then you don't prospect and you don't sell and you miss opportunities? And I know, and everybody goes through this challenge in how they manage themselves in their time. I go through it as well. I have this same stuff that I still go through, and sometimes it creeps into my schedule and I go, I've got to get this done. I've got this operational thing. I've got that update, all these things that happen. But I have to catch myself sometimes and realize that, wait a minute, that's that's a low value activity. That's a, I'm going to do that later type of thing. And I'll tell you how I do it. And you may take this and use it or not, or whatever you got to do. If it's communication that I've got to get back to somebody, as long as it's not time sensitive, I'll do it after prime time. If it's working on a proposal or getting something together for somebody, I'll do it after prime time. It may mean that I invest another hour or two into my day after I've done what I needed to do during prime time, after I prioritize prospecting and selling. But to me, I find that to be in many ways therapeutic, because what it allows me to do, it allows me for the most part to focus the majority of my time and energy during prime time on what I know are high value activities. So when you look at everything else that you have to do, make a list. And one of the things that I would encourage you to do for your own understanding of this, make a list across a day or a couple of days of all the things that you do during the day, all the things that you do maybe between the hours of 9 to 5, and write down all the things that you do. And when you look at the list, I'd like you to go back down that list as you read it and circle the things that are specifically related to prospecting and selling. And when I say related to, I mean, you're doing prospecting and selling. I mean, you're either on the phone, you're sending messages, you're sending emails, you're in a meeting, you're on a call with somebody. That's prospecting and selling stuff. Okay. Now take a look at that list. And if your list of 10, 15, 20 things has just a few circles on it, then you didn't spend the majority of your day focusing on high value activities. You spent the majority of your day focusing on low value activities. But if you look down that list and you can honestly say during your prime time that the majority of things are circles, then I would tell you that I believe that that's a solid day. That's a day that you're focusing on your priorities. You're doing the things that are necessary. For those of you that are on this call that are coaches and work with anybody in selling environments or situations, it's a simple little technique to share with people when it comes to how they manage their time. Write down everything that you do throughout the day and follow that process. Just circle the things that are directly prospecting or selling. And if you don't see a lot of things circled, then you start going down the list and saying, could this be done at a different time or by somebody else? Is this something that you could prioritize later in the day, in the evening, on the weekend? Is it something that has to happen? Because if it is, that happens. We understand that happens sometimes. But if you look at the majority of your day and you find that you have most of your day filled with those things, you're going to have a problem. And I'll tell you, when I do this, and I've done this, I don't know, with hundreds of people in the corporate world, when I had teams, I would say to see somebody like, let's open up your calendar. Let's break down what you were doing and let's kind of write all this stuff out. What were you doing during this time? What were you doing during that time? Same process I just described. It was amazing to me, the eye-opening experience that people had. They would look over their day and go, well, no wonder I didn't get anything done. I did this, I did that, I started this. They would start their day late. They would quit it early. Like they didn't start their calls until 9:30. They wrapped up at 4:15. Like all of a sudden the picture became very, very clear as to why they weren't generating the activity that they needed to generate. Now, ultimately, you all get to make that own decision for yourself, how you manage your time, what you focus on. But I promise you, as it relates to sales momentum and generating the sales results that you want, if you allow too much of your schedule to be filled with lower value activities, things that somebody else could be doing or could be done in an off-peak time, you're going to struggle to hit your sales results. You may have periods of time where you hit them, but you won't be consistent. Okay. It's one of those little things that you need to figure out how to solve to be successful consistently. I think as it relates to everybody, especially starting a new year, it's so important that you remind yourself about what high value activities are and what low value activities are. And that you look down everything that you do and start offloading things that are low value activities if you see it creeping into your schedule. If you see too much of your time being spent on those things and that time is prime time, I implore you, take a look at whatever it takes to change that in your schedule. Because if you really want to drill down on the numbers and you really want to drive the activity, that needs to be part of that process. You need to make sure that you're dedicating enough time for prospecting and dedicating enough time for selling. Now, I know, depending upon every person's situation, there are different things that they have to do, but there are also things that free people up. There are resources out there. If it's something that is a manual process that anybody can really do, it just requires time. Man, go hire a VA and get them to do it for you. Save that time and energy and focus your time and energy on prospecting and selling. Okay. If it comes down to you moving your business forward or you're keeping your business flat and it really is related to prospecting and selling, well, the simple answer is you need to prioritize that and you need to do more of that than anything else. That should be the priority of what you spend your time doing. Now, I know in selling environments, sometimes they're very dynamic and things get thrown at us. Part of the reason why what I described today is so important is that the vast majority of things that impact our schedule, I don't know, 85% of them are things within our control. It's simply a matter of how we've chosen to work on what we work on and when we choose to do it. Most of the time, it's not some extremely urgent, high profile, major need that comes from a prospect or client that is stuck in the middle of our day. It's usually something, quite honestly, that you could do some other time. And, maybe as you think of it, you can think of situations and realize that that's exactly true. Because what happens, we want to be responsive. That's normal. We want to get back to people as quick as possible, which is a good thing, but not by sacrificing our prime time, not by giving up something that's extremely valuable to us. So take a long, hard look at that schedule. Look at what you're doing. Look at how you're prioritizing things and realizing that the only high value activity, the only place where you should be spending the majority of your prime time hours is in prospecting and selling. And everything else, no matter what it is, with the exception of the occasional urgent matter that comes up from a client or a prospect, is probably something that you could do at another time. And, when you find yourself struggling, when you find yourself not attaining the numbers you'd like to attain, when you think that, oh my gosh, I'm not getting enough prospects, I'm not getting enough proposals out, I'm not generating enough sales, make sure you spend time looking at your calendar and asking yourself this question: did I prioritize enough time for prospecting and selling? Because I'm willing to bet that part of the problem rests in this category. Part of the problem is because maybe you didn't dedicate enough time to it. Now, I've got a couple of other corresponding topics to how we quick start the year coming up over the next couple of weeks of the VIP call. I felt this was an important one for right now because I know from my own experience, certainly this past week, it seems like all of these things that potentially can pull me away from what I know my prime time activity should be are now starting to pop up. So I thought this was a great opportunity to cover this during today's VIP call and make sure that all of you were thinking about this as well. Prospecting and selling will always be your highest value activities, especially when you're working for yourselves, because if you're not doing it, you better have somebody else that's doing it and doing it well. But if you don't, you need to be focused on this no matter what. And you can't ever take your foot off the gas pedal, because as soon as you do, you're all but guaranteeing that you're going to have that roller coaster effect at some point. Your numbers will dip and you'll look at it and conveniently you'll be able to look back a couple of weeks prior and you realize, well, this was a really bad week or two. I was doing all this other stuff and I wasn't prospecting and selling enough. And I want to make sure that all of you avoid that. I want to make sure you get ahead of that. I want to make sure that you all don't have that catch you for 2023 that you get a fast start to the year and you keep your momentum. So that's what I had to cover for today. That's what I wanted to review with everybody. So I'm going to, whoa, did I lose? All of a sudden, the screen jumped on me. My apologies. Hold on. Gotta love technology, huh?
You didn't lose us. We're still here.
Okay. I know you guys are. I lost my screen. There we go. Okay. So let's jump into the Q&A. This Q&A can be anything about what we just covered today, or you can ask me anything sales-wise, anything about impact sales mastery, whatever I can answer for you. So what do you guys got for me today?
Hey, Joe, it's David. How's it going?
Hey, David, how are you?
Good. Yeah, good, thank you. In the beginning of the course, you talk about how one of the first steps is just reaching out to personal contacts, just to start getting used to reaching out again and making it a habit. And would you consider that part of your prospecting?
Great question. And the short answer is yes, I would under those circumstances. Absolutely. Yes, your interaction is going to prioritize them. And we talked about that in last week's VIP. You're reaching out to them as a priority, but it is ultimately geared towards you creating some additional warm introductions for your business. So yeah, I would consider that prospect, and that's well worth the time and investment. Now, assuming that that's the intent, right? Reaching back out
Yes.
and making it about them. Yes, that would definitely be something that would fall under the prospecting category.
Good. Yeah, I figured. And, just a note with time blocking. Time blocking in the
Yep.
calendar when you were telling me, look at all the things you do in a day. If you time block yourself within an inch of your life, you get so much more done. But, in terms of my time blocking, I'm making this time block, I'm making calls for whoever I can get a hold of for the next half an hour.
Yep.
For this one, I'm following up with people who have reached out to me. This one, I'm talking to old clients. So it's amazing when you don't do that, how easily you are distracted. And when you do time block, it's just easier. It just makes it easier to not get distracted.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And just to piggyback on that, that's so true, because I want you to think about the rest of the world who's working against you in that effort, because everybody else in the world is trying to get your attention. And this is, it's significant because it's true. You're on social media, people are trying to get your attention. People are emailing you, calling you, texting you. Everybody else is trying to reach out to you. And maybe it is beneficial for your business, maybe it's not. But the whole world is in this conspiracy to try to get your attention and distract you. And it's a noisy, crowded world. So the list is endless of people that are trying to do that. So you time blocking your high priority activities like prospecting and selling is critical, because everybody else is lining up to take your time. They're thieves of time. Now,
absolutely.
I'm not saying that those things aren't important, but it's really easy to sit back in today's world, especially if you're on social media, and go, oh my gosh, what happened to the last 3 hours? Or what happened to this morning? Like, I got caught up in this and I watched this and I got this ad and it was about a webinar, and the webinar is in my industry. So I just decided I'm going to jump on it. And next thing I know, the morning's gone. Right.
Yeah. And you can time block social media and those things also. A lot of people don't realize that, what happens with your computers, all our devices are connected. So if you get an email comes in or you get a text message, it flashes across your computer screen. Right. But you can turn those, and then it catches your eye like, but you can turn those alerts off so that when you're looking at one thing, you don't see anything else. A lot of people don't realize that's happening. You can turn that off so no banners pop across your computer screen.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm not trying to tell anybody what they have to do. I'm just expressing the importance of those things and whether you acknowledge it or not, you have to safeguard your time. Like that's the one thing you can't get more of. If you lose access to that time because you get sucked into things that aren't productive for you, it gets harder and harder for you to reach your goals. People ask me, when I personally one-on-one sit down with somebody and we go through outside of the stuff with ISM, what are some of the other things that we may talk about? And, calendar is one of those things we talk about a lot. I can talk about, okay, well, what time's your day start? What time do you wrap up the day? When do you do this? When do you do that? Like, it's just one of those things that I just believe that if you don't control it, it controls you. So, yeah, so that's a really good point, David. And absolutely, that is prospecting. It's interacting with the purpose of trying to generate prospects for your business, which is definitely prospecting. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. So who else has something?
I have a question. It's Susie.
Hey, Susie.
All right. So with my business, I'm global.
Mm-hmm.
So I get messages all hours of the day and night.
Sure.
I mean, I'll get throughout the day, I will get LinkedIn messages. I'll get them all the time.
Yep.
I have a immediate knee-jerk reaction from my past, I guess, to not respond immediately because somehow, somewhere from my sales past, to me, it feels like desperate if I immediately email them back. Like I feel like I should wait a little bit to email them back. But I know that they're also sending this message sort of into a void. They see my profile. They see they're texting me through LinkedIn because they've seen my profile and they like it, but it's still cold. Like they still don't know who I am. Am I actually there? So I always have this mental fight. Do I respond to them immediately, or does that look desperate? Or do I make it clear that I'm there? Or do I wait for some kind of prime time to get back to them?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it's a great question and thought. It all depends quite a bit on how you perceive things and how you look at things yourself. I love responsiveness, but that doesn't mean you have to bend over backward and let your prospects control your schedule. So, a couple of things I've done, like if I happen to be online and I see a message come in off hours, I may shoot back a quick message and say, I'm not in the office, but I'd love to connect with you tomorrow, anytime between these hours. Like if it's not something that's conducive, remember what I said about prime time being. Prime time is when you're available and they're available. I'm not in any way saying you have to be available when they are. I'm just saying that there's a likelihood where the majority of contacts can happen. So I think you can be responsive without being too accommodating. Let's face it, nowadays, if you immediately reply to somebody, they think you're a bot. They think you're an automation. Like you reply right away. Like I get this all the time on LinkedIn. People say, is this really you? I'm like, yeah, it's me. Like, why? Well, because it just like the response was so quick. They were like, was surprised that it was that quick. I believe though that even early, you want to be responsive, but you also want to position yourself as somebody who's busy. Like I think there's a lot of value in positioning yourself as I'm busy. I can't just drop what I'm doing to deal with this because I'm busy. I'm successful. I'm busy. I have a lot of things going on. I'll maybe reply quickly and give you a time when we could connect. But right now is not that time. That's an acceptable response. But I don't think there's anything wrong at all with allowing a little bit of time to go through. When you're good and they know you're good, they'll be patient as long as you get back to them, within a professional timetable. Does that make sense, Susie?
Yeah, that makes sense. But my follow-up question is a professional timetable half a day later, 2 days later, a day later?
I mean, personally, I think it's 24 hours max, but
Okay.
I mean, everybody may feel differently about it. Like, I don't have a problem. Like, if I get back to somebody, I want it to be within 24 hours at the longest. Is it a lot sooner most of the time? Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
Thank you.
I don't think there's a clock out there. And most people might say, like, it's professional to reply back within a certain amount of time. The world's changed so much recently. I don't know what that really means for a lot of people nowadays. I know as an older guy, I was always trained and told you will return all messages within 24 hours. You will reply to all messages within 24 hours. Like, that was drilled into my head in the corporate world. I don't know if the same rules apply. I like the standard though. I think it makes a lot of sense. Anything more than that, and they may think you don't care at all. So I think 24 is a good number, but really it's not a hard and fast rule nowadays, but that's one I follow. Cool. So what other questions do you guys have?
Apologies, I probably sound really sick right now, and that's because I am.
Oh
It's
no. Hold on, let me get my
I got the
mask.
winter bug. Yeah, I got the winter bug. Thankfully, you guys are safe where you're at.
Yeah.
So one of my questions is, do you, Joe, have a standard um, sales cadence you would use when following up? Do you feel that it should be in weekly intervals, multiple week intervals? I know some of these things do depend and you can change these things as needed, but just as a standard practice, do you think it's a good idea to be in contact with people on a weekly to bi-weekly basis, or should it be longer? Should it be shorter?
Yeah, great question. And I think in today's world, considering, what the average attention span is now, I think shorter is better. I think, from one week to the next, if you've never engaged them, reach out one day, they don't respond, reach out the next day, they don't respond, maybe reach out in 3 days after that, they don't respond, try again in a couple more days, within a week, you've tried 4 times and there's no response, but at least you did everything you could possibly do. Gaps between stuff, there's too much stuff that happens. Like, if you reach out once every other week to somebody, it's not even resonating anymore. Like, they probably won't even remember. They get so much from so many people. It changes though, Adonis. I think it changes when you've had some degree of interaction with them. So that first scenario is cold prospecting or prospecting somebody that you don't have any relationship with yet. Well, the next time, maybe you do know them. Maybe you've already communicated with them. In that case, you should have different things from some of the questions that you've asked them, maybe some of the impact-driven questions that you can drop into your follow-ups to grab their attention again. So, maybe you send them a message, they don't respond. Maybe your follow-up the next day includes something specifically that they mentioned during your call that you want to just kind of bring top of mind again. There's no response there. You give it another couple of days, you try again, and you do that again with a reminder, like, I know this was important to you, so I wanted to reach out, and put it back in front of them again. I think in today's world, until somebody tells you, I'm not ready now, I need X amount of time, I think you're almost always better to work on a shorter window. And if they say, look, I'm not ready, check back with me in 90 days, great, check back with them in 75. If they say, check back with me in a month, check back with them in 3 weeks and get something in the calendar. Always be ahead of what they say. But until they tell you don't reach out, I would stay on them in a short window. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I'm always hearing, and I'm hearing everybody talk about the average attention span of people, and especially as it relates to limited interaction. You you have to recognize that the average person sees hundreds, if not thousands, of different things between messages, videos. They're just inundated with stuff, and your stuff is going to be buried in all of that. So you have to keep on them a little bit. Again, until the point that they say, no, I'm not ready, or reach out, then at that point you alter your message. Cool.
Makes sense to me.
Awesome. Good question. Okay, what other questions do we have? Okay, real quick, I'm going to give you guys just a little preview of what we're going to talk about next week, specifically on the VIP call. And I'm going to hype this a little bit to some people so they know what we're going to talk about. Hopefully we'll draw more people to participate live in this. We're going to be digging in next week to client acquisition systems. We're going to be talking about a variety of different client acquisition systems, what they should include, what you should be looking for, and most importantly, how you recognize when things are and aren't working and how to make adjustments. So it's going to really be an action-packed VIP next week. There's a lot of stuff that's going to go into this one for next week. So make sure you catch that one. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. The purpose for the next couple of weeks is going to be to highlight a couple of key components of ISM and peel back some additional layers and really, really focus on what we're doing along those lines. We are going, and I mentioned this earlier, we don't have it finalized yet, but at some point later this year, we are going to be doing an Impact Sales Mastery live summit. And it's going to be a small group of people that are going to get together in Arizona in person to do ISM. We're going to be doing it though in summit form, rapid fire. It's going to be like an intensive 2-day event. And everybody that's here that's already been through ISM will be, welcome to attend, re-sit in on it live in person if you want to see it done live. But the idea behind it is to create some different experiences for people related to ISM and impact selling so they can get familiar with it, they get comfortable with it. There are a lot of people that are looking for this type of help and learn in different ways. So we've been kicking this around for a bit. So stay tuned. When we finalize the details, we'll share it with everybody, but I think it's going to be pretty exciting when we do it. And everybody that's been through it is going to be welcome to sit in live themselves again, just to sit in and participate and be a part of the live experience. So it's a different training event, different training experience, same content, but there's a different energy to it when you do it live. So, okay, we got time for at least one more question. Anybody have anything else for me? Okay, well, if there's no other questions, we are going to wrap up. Stay tuned for some updates specifically on what we're going to be doing next week in the VIP. Appreciate you all being here. Look forward to catching you next week. You guys have a great week. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Appreciate it.